Manchester City are, struggling for Manchester City's sake at this point. Should they be worried about Phil Foden's form this season, Paul? Obviously, last year, Player of the Year. This year, not so much. Struggling, not really scoring goals, not getting into the side every week necessarily. Would you be worried about Phil Foden?
I think it's easy to look at Manchester City because of the bar that they've set themselves, and especially Phil Foden, who was a huge part of that last year. You look at the goals that he scored last year, the Premier League Player of the Year last season. And I think when you set yourself that standard, as soon as you fall even slightly below that, people are going to ask questions. And we're all guilty of it in the media. We're all looking at Manchester City now. There's a massive crisis because they've lost 4 games. They've lost 2 Premier League games. They've lost in the Champions League and they lost to Spurs in the Carabao Cup. So in the media world, it's a huge crisis for Manchester City because we're that used to seeing them just sweep everybody aside. We're not used to seeing Manchester City lose. We're used to seeing them win every week. Every season we do a pre-season preview, and quite a lot of the times the words that come out of people's mouth is whoever finishes above Manchester City will win the league. And that's the bar that they've set themselves. So as soon as they do have a dip, we all go, oh, what's wrong at Manchester City? Oh, what's wrong with Phil Foden, Kevin De Bruyne, Haaland, etc. And we start looking and pointing fingers at different players. Listen, Foden isn't playing as well as he did last year, but he's playing in a team that's struggling. He's playing in a team that's not playing well, it's a huge factor that it credits itself to individual players' performances as well as a team performance.
I've just got one thing to say on Foden. There'll be no concern at Manchester City. My ethos will be form is temporary, class is permanent, and I'm sure Phil Foden will be back to his best at some point in this season because he's going to be needed if Manchester City are to sort of get back to the form that we know they can show. But yeah, there'll be no massive concerns over his form. Phil Foden, still such a young player, has achieved so much, and he is a class player on his day. He's one of the best in the world, so I'm confident that he'll soon regain that form.
And you don't worry about burnout at all. Obviously played all the way up through the Euros. Didn't perform his best at all for England at the Euros. Obviously a very hot topic. How does Phil Foden fit into the England squad? And then kind of bringing that lack of form and confidence into this season. Are you worried about burnout even though he's such a young player? I mean, we've seen that in the past with really special young talents.
No, there's players talking about the amount of games that they're asked to play. But as a player, I always used to prefer playing rather than training. You ask a lot of players and they prefer to play rather than train. It's the demands that are put on players, the travel, the nights away, etc. Listen, the players are rewarded hugely, so you'll find it very, very hard to find anyone who's got any kind of sympathy or empathy for the players who are rewarded numerically, financially for the way that they are. I get it, I understand it, but it's something that it is real with players. Players do get fatigued, players do get tired, but they get looked after. They travel the world in the best way that they possibly can. And they're looked after in the best possible way that they can. But what Rodri said was interesting when he did his press conference. Before his injury, I think it was about 6 weeks ago. He was worried. He said about the quality dropping, constant quality. So we're used to seeing the Premier League as the best product in the world. That quality, the level of performance, will drop if the demands on players increase. You can only ask somebody to do something so many times regularly or more often, and the performance levels will drop. You can understand that. Listen, fatigue for Manchester City, you know what you're signing up for. You're going to be in every competition. You're going to be challenging for every single title or cup that you're in, and you're going to be playing this amount of games. The squad and the season is designed to do that, and it will have effect on players at certain times of the season. This is not a new conversation. We have this conversation every single season, and we'll have it again in January. We'll talk about fixture pile-up. We haven't got Jurgen Klopp this year telling us about the half-12 kickoffs and how hard done to Liverpool are because of the early kickoffs. But every single year we have the same conversations. But actually, if you're going to be at one of the top 6-8 clubs in the Premier League in Europe, you know what you're signing up for because you're going to play in these games.
And Pete, Manchester City starting to age a little bit in terms of defense. We have John Stones, who's 30 years old. Akanji is 29. Nathan Ake is 29. Kyle Walker obviously getting up in the 30s as well. Could they look to sign Sepp Vandenberg and potentially Jeremy Frimpong as well come this summer to kind of restart and refresh that back four?
Yeah, I think it'll be something in the background at Manchester City that they will have contingency plans in place, long-term transfer targets, as you said. The squad is not getting any younger. Kyle Walker, there was a lot of talk last season that he possibly could move to Bayern Munich. Didn't end up happening. He ended up staying at Man City. There's been constant talk of moves to Saudi Arabia as well. So whether that reappears in January or the summer, we'll remain to be seen. Obviously, he is now in his 30s, so he is coming to the end of his career. So I'm sure Man City will be looking for long-term right-back options. I think Jeremy Frimpong would be an ideal signing for them. Obviously, he knows the club well as well. He came through the ranks at City before moving to Celtic in 2019, and from there he's gone on to establish himself as one of the best right wing backs in Europe. Very impressive with Bayer Leverkusen. So the link with Man City comes as no surprise, really. A number of clubs are looking at Frimpong.
And
Manchester
like you
United.
said last week, Pete, about Pedro Porro, you made a great point about Porro at Tottenham, because the link with Porro and Manchester City was there, in the same way as Frimpong came through the Manchester City academy, understands the club, understands the way that they play. The transition would be smooth, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 100%. He would go in there, hit the ground running, you would imagine, under Pep Guardiola, or if there is a different manager at Manchester City. Frimpong knows the Premier League, he knows Manchester City. I think it'd be a great fit for them, but Man City just won't have it their own way. There'll be a number of clubs who would like to sign the Dutchman. I think in the summer transfer window, Real Madrid will be right in there, especially if they don't land Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. The Sepp van den Berg one comes as a bit of a surprise. Didn't get much of a look in at Liverpool. Spent most of his time at Anfield out on loan. So the interest from City is a bit of a surprise as well. But he's gone to Brentford this summer to try and get regular first team football. I'm sure City might be keeping tabs on him, but I don't think he'll be at the top of their list right now to be looking to bring him in as a future signing. But yeah, as I said, Frimpong would tick a lot of boxes.
And Paul, Mike Maignan, the AC Milan goalkeeper, the French #1, rumored to be Ederson's replacement after this year. We all kind of assume Ederson's in his last year at Manchester City alongside Kevin De Bruyne, of course. Do you think he's kind of the most like-for-like replacement for Ederson you could find in world football right now?
Listen, he's a good goalkeeper. I mean, at 29, you'd probably argue that he's at the peak of his career. You look at where he is with AC Milan. I think he served his time at Lille from 2015-21. You look at his appearances, you look at his caps, and you'd say where he is now, he's probably playing some of his best football. Not sure on what transfer fee would be involved, but Ederson, he's a top goalkeeper. I think he's going to stay at Manchester City for as long as he wants to stay at Manchester City. That Saudi move isn't going away. That's always mooted in the background. That will always be there for him in the same way it is for Kevin De Bruyne, because of his international status and his status as an international player. That option will be there. But Ortega is at Manchester City. We spoke about Ortega last week. He's a top quality goalkeeper and he's going to want to play at some point. I'd fancy Ortega going head to head with Maignan for the #1 spot. Maignan could come in. Yeah, you could see him as a replacement for Ederson. But at the moment, if I was Manchester City, I certainly wouldn't be looking to replace Ederson unless he's making noises that he wants to move.